Hey everyone, I dug up 5 of the creepy Reddit posts on the internet for you. Like, subscribe, and let's dive in. Before we start, if you ever want to go deeper, the LostFootage Club is where our community trades their own creepy stories. You'll find the link in the description. My childhood nanny gave me a bedtime medicine the whole house trusted. At 37, a routine scan finally showed me what it left in my bones. She kept ledgers for a living. This was the one column she could never balance. I am 37, an accountant in a small town, and I live alone. I like ledgers. I like columns that reconcile and totals that agree, things that add up and stay where I put them, which is exactly why I cannot file away what a scan showed me last week. When I was small, our nanny Rachel was the one steady, gentle thing in the house. My parents worked late, but Rachel was always there at bedtime with a ritual nobody had taught her. First, a bitter spoonful of tonic she made herself, dark and sharp enough to make me shiver. Then her thumbs counting slowly down my spine, one knob at a time, like she was making sure I was all still there. And last, a tiny soft pellet she tucked under my tongue to dissolve while she whispered that it would keep me safe. My parents thought it was harmless, a little old-fashioned and sweet, so for years they let her do it every single night. I felt loved. I felt watched over. Last week, a doctor ordered a routine scan for something boring and unrelated. Halfway through, the tech went quiet. She turned the monitor toward me and asked, very carefully, if I had ever been given folk medicine as a child. Layered through my spine and my jaw were faint, dense specks, stacked in soft rings, one over the next, like the inside of a cut tree. Her stomach dropped. The gentlest part of her childhood had been quietly writing itself into her skeleton. She had spent her whole life trusting numbers. Now her own bones were keeping a count she never agreed to. The walk home was only 15 minutes. She counted every one of them backward. I did not drive straight home. I sat in the parking lot first, then I walked, because I needed my hands to do something, and my feet were all I had. And the whole way, I did what I always do when a number frightens me. I started reconciling. One spoonful, one pellet, every night for the years Rachel was with us. I tried to count the nights, and the figure got so large I lost it, the way you lose a column when your eye slips a row. The taste came back to me on that walk, sharp and bitter under chalk, and the soft give of the pellet against the roof of my mouth. I remembered her thumbs walking down my spine, counting, her voice low so the rest of the house would not hear. And I remembered things I had folded away. Rachel measuring something into a spoon by the kitchen light, careful as a chemist. A small locked tin she kept on the high shelf. The way she would press a finger to her lips and tell me the medicine was just between us, so it works. My parents never asked. Why would they? She loved us. She stayed late, she sang, she never once raised her voice. They thought it was a little old-fashioned and a little sweet, and they let her. I called my younger brother Derek that night, half hoping he would say I was making it up. He laughed. He said of course he remembered, the spoonful and the spine counting and the little pellet, that it was one of the warmest things he could remember about being small. He remembered it fondly. That undid me more than any forgetting could have. If it had hurt them, they would have flinched. Instead, they both remembered being loved. I read Rachel's ledger, and Derek and I were not the only names in it. I told myself a scan tech was not a doctor, that I needed someone who could actually read what was in me before I let my imagination finish the sentence. So I asked for a referral, and I got one, to a hematologist named Dr. Nolan. I will write what she told me once I can hold the words steady. For now, I only want to say this. I went home, and I did not sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad, the same yellow pads I use for clients, and I tried to build a schedule of every night I could account for. I made columns, dates I was sure of, dates I guessed, and somewhere around the 3rd page I stopped, because I realized I was doing the one thing I am good at, the thing that has paid my rent for 15 years, and I was doing it to my own body, adding up what someone had quietly put into me, one careful spoonful at a time, while I lay there trusting her completely. The hematologist did not reassure her. She only explained, which was worse. Dr. Nolan was calm in the way people are calm when they have already decided not to lie to you. She took blood, she ordered more imaging, and she asked me careful questions about my childhood that did not feel careful at all. Then she turned her own screen toward me, the way the tech had, and pointed at the faint rings in my spine. She told me that was not a smudge or an artifact. It was a record. Tiny, repeated doses of something heavy, taken in over years, settling deep into the bone and laid down in layers. One band for each long stretch of exposure, the way a tree puts on a ring for every year it stands. She said bone is patient. It holds on to things. It keeps them long after the rest of you would have flushed them out. And as the body remodels itself with age, all that stored history starts to move again. I sat there and did the only thing I know how to do under pressure. I added it up. 1 spoonful, 1 pellet, every night, for years. And the total was not a number anymore. It was the soft, gentle shape of the kindest person in my childhood, leaning over my bed, counting down my spine. The warmest hand she could remember had been performing a procedure on her, slowly, in the dark. A user named Marrow and Mortar wrote, "The way you described the rings in the bone made my stomach drop. That is exactly how chronic exposure shows up, deposited in layers over years. Whatever was in that tonic, she was dosing you on a schedule." In the comments, someone wrote, "Please tell me your brother got tested. If she did the same ritual to him every night, he needs to know yesterday." A user named Ledgerlines X wrote, "An accountant finding out her whole childhood was logged in someone else's neat little columns. I am so sorry. That ledger is going to haunt me too." One commenter, Marrow and Mortar, said, "I keep coming back to this. Do you actually know what was in the tonic, or is it still a guess? Because the layering you described is textbook heavy metal." And the original poster replied, "It's not a guess anymore. The lab named it. And when I found Rachel's ledger, she had written the recipe inside the back cover in her own hand. A homemade tincture she cooked down herself. She measured my doses to the drop. She knew exactly what she was putting in me. She just believed with her whole heart it was the right thing to do." 2 days later, she came back with an update, and the title alone made the thread go quiet. I read Rachel's ledger, and Derek and I were not the only names in it. I drove to my mother's house to start clearing the boxes she left behind, because that is the kind of dull, dutiful task that usually lets me stop thinking. At the bottom of one box, under tax folders she had kept for no reason, I found a water-stained notebook I did not recognize. Rachel's handwriting was on the first page, and for one warm second I thought I had found her diary. It was not a diary. It was a ledger. Columns of dates, and beside each one a tiny, measured amount, drops and grains, careful as anything I have ever balanced for a client. My name ran across the top of one section, and the pages beneath it were filled, cover to cover. Derek's were too. At the top of the very first page, in her neat hand, she had written a line like a prayer. "So it stays in them, so nothing can take them." She believed she was protecting us. She has been dead for 11 years. There is no one left to confront, no one to be angry at to their face. And then I turned past our pages, and the columns kept going. Other names, other children she had minded, before us and after, each with their own neat little schedule. Quiet RN Nights commented, "I work in hematology, and I have to be honest with you. Lead and similar metals that store in bone are brutal because the body re-releases them for the rest of your life. I am so sorry you are learning this now and not as a kid." Deborah LH commented, "The header line, 'So nothing can take them,' is going to live in my head." She wasn't careless. In her mind, this was love. One comment pointed out, "That's what makes it unbearable. A careless person you can hate cleanly. A devoted one who poisoned children to protect them from something only she could see is so much worse." Dr. Nolan did not soften it. She laid it out like a balance sheet, line by line. The verdict came in plain words. Decades of those tiny, nightly doses had not just passed through me, they had fused into the marrow, become part of the structure, And now that I am older, my body has started to remodel itself the way everybody does. The trouble is that as it breaks down the old bone, it lets the poison loose again, a little at a time, all on its own. Dr. Nolan said chelation could pull some of it out of my blood, but nothing reaches what has already become bone. There is no draining it. There is no scraping it out. And the slow neurological dimming I have been blaming on stress, the dropped words, the numbers that swim on the page some afternoons, she told me that has already begun, and it does not come back. Then she told me Derek's results had arrived, the same as mine. Reading by reading, his bones keep the same rings. Rachel has been dead for 11 years. There is no one to scream at, no bottle to pour out, no locked tin to take away. The thing that is hurting me is simply what I am made of now, and my little brother is made of it too. I balance columns for a living. I have closed books that fought me for weeks. This is the one entry I will never reconcile, because there is no other side to post it against. It just sits there, in me, in him, owing nothing and paying nothing back. The kindest hands she ever knew had written themselves into the marrow, and the ledger will never close. Someone in the replies added, "A soft pellet that dissolves under the tongue is a delivery method. That is not a folk cuddle. That is someone making sure it absorbed even when you wouldn't swallow the spoon." This is the most disturbing detail to me. One commenter, "We used to have one," said, "We had a sitter who insisted on her own little bedtime thing my mom never asked for, and reading this I went cold remembering the taste of it. I genuinely don't know what I drank." That is where she left it, with the books open and nothing to balance them. On to the next one. A shared funeral playlist had a voicemail from my dead best friend, dated tomorrow. Grief flattens time. It makes you reach for anything that still sounds like the person you lost, even when the reaching starts to frighten you. My name is Spencer. I'm 33, and I clean teeth for a living, so I spend my days calm and gentle for strangers, while something inside me has quietly come apart. My best friend Laura died 7 weeks ago. I keep writing that and deleting it because it still won't fit in my mouth. We met in our 20s, and she knew the unflattering version of me and stayed anyway. Since the funeral, my weeks have gone flat and gray, one clinic shift bleeding into the next, back to the apartment I share with 2 roommates, one of them my friend Caleb. Her family built a memorial playlist, the kind anyone can add to, and it filled fast. Her parents, her co-workers, her twin sister Natalie. I play it on a loop at night because the songs feel like keeping her in the room with me. Last night I was scrolling it, half asleep, when I hit a track with no cover art and no artist. It wasn't a song. It was an audio file, and it was her voice. Warm, casual, exactly how she always sounded. She was describing my apartment, the chipped blue mug on my counter, the blanket bunched on the left side of the couch. Tiny things I never photographed, never told a soul. Things only someone standing in my locked living room that night could know. And the recorded on date read as tomorrow. He played it again, and then again, until the apartment felt smaller around him, like the walls had quietly been listening the whole time he grieved. Tomorrow had not arrived yet, and somehow, impossibly, her voice already had. The mind reaches for any explanation that lets you keep breathing. Spencer reached for all of them. The first thing I did was tell myself it was a glitch. A re-upload bug, maybe. Some clip pulled from a video Laura took before she died. The date stamp scrambled by whatever server it lived on now. That theory lasted exactly as long as it took me to open the file details again. The recorded on date still read tomorrow. I checked it on my phone, then on Caleb's laptop when he was at work, and it held both times, stubborn and impossible. So I did the only thing my tired brain could think of. I played it on a loop and transcribed it word for word, like writing it down would force it to make sense. Her voice was so easy, so warm, the way she sounded ordering coffee or laughing at me. She mentioned the squeak my front door makes when it swings past halfway. She named the little dish by the entrance where I drop my keys every single night. She described the way the left cushion of the couch sags because that was always where she sat. I got up and checked. The blue mug was on the counter, exactly where the recording said. The blanket was bunched on the left, untouched. And I knew, the way you know your own name, that nobody on this earth had a photo of any of it. I didn't tell my roommates. I came home from a full day of scraping plaque and smiling at strangers, and I couldn't make my mouth form the words, because the only version of this story I could tell out loud was one where grief had finally cracked me open. Then the small things started. The blanket refolded when I swore I'd left it crumpled. The mug rinsed clean when I'd left it ringed with old coffee. I started doubting myself, wondering if a roommate was just tidying. But the wrongness kept stacking, quiet and patient. So I'm posting this. Has anyone anywhere had something like this happen? He hit submit at 3 in the morning, half hoping a stranger would tell him it was nothing. None of them did. Being watched has a texture. It sits low in the stomach and never quite leaves. The nausea started living in me after that. I'd lie in the dark with the playlist auto-playing through my earbuds, and every time a song faded, I braced for her voice to slide in next, certain that somehow it knew what I was doing right then, in that exact minute. I started believing it was really her, that Laura had found a seam in the world and was pressing her mouth to it, trying to reach me. Grief makes that feel almost reasonable at 4 in the morning. So I tested it. One night, I took a paperback off my shelf and set it on the kitchen floor, spine up, in the middle of the tile where it made no sense to be. A stupid little trap. I told no one. 2 days later, a new file had appeared in the playlist, tucked between 2 ballads, and her warm, easy voice mentioned a book lying open on the kitchen floor, like someone had dropped it running. I stood in my kitchen holding my phone, and I could not feel my hands. I almost walked down the hall to Caleb's room right then. I had my knuckles up to knock. But what would I even say? That our dead friend was narrating my floor? I went back to bed. I lay there until my alarm dragged me up for another shift, smiling at patience with my jaw aching from clenching all night. It took me 3 more days of this to land on the only question that actually mattered. Not how she knew, not whether it was a ghost, just one plain, practical thing I needed to ask Caleb to his face. Who else ever had a key to this place? The thread filled while he worked. Strangers circled the same word he'd been too scared to say out loud. In the comments, someone wrote, "The future date on the file is what got me. Voicemails don't reach forward. Someone made that recently and made it sound old." Someone in the replies added, "I'm so sorry about Laura, but the part where the blanket was on the left side and you never told anyone?" I had to put my phone down. A user named Sodium Lamp wrote, "Update us when you can, and maybe don't sleep there alone until the cylinder is swapped." One commenter, Midnight Archivist, said, "Could the date just be a metadata glitch from re-uploading the file? Re-encode scrambled timestamps all the time. I wouldn't trust it alone." The reply to that was, "I wanted that to be it so badly. But a glitch doesn't describe the chipped blue mug. I bought that mug 2 days before I found the file. It had never left my counter, and nobody had been over. A scrambled timestamp can't know what's sitting in my kitchen. That's the part I can't make small." The next morning, before his shift, he cornered Caleb in the kitchen. By that afternoon, he was back with an update. And the answer was so much worse than a ghost. Caleb finally admitted who he gave the spare to. I asked him straight, no build-up. "Who else has ever had a key?" He went pale and set his coffee down, and I knew before he said it. Months ago, he gave the spare to Natalie, Laura's twin. He said she'd been falling apart, that she just wanted to feel close to where her sister used to hang out, and it seemed harmless, a grieving sister sitting in our living room for an hour. He never thought to tell me. So there was no seam in the world, no reaching through. It was Natalie the whole time, letting herself in while I was at the clinic scraping plaque or dead asleep down the hall, sitting in Laura's old spot on the left side of the couch, recording herself in that voice that is identical to her twins, describing my room out loud in real time. The mug, the blanket, the book on the floor. She narrated my home like she was keeping Laura alive inside it, and then she slid each recording into the memorial playlist where she knew I'd eventually find them. The future date wasn't a haunting. It was the day she had circled to finally tell me what she'd been doing. I have spent weeks thinking the safest voice I ever knew was comforting me from somewhere else. She was just on my couch. The grief I'd wrapped around like a blanket was a person, breathing, in my locked apartment the entire time. The comments turned the moment over and over, and not one of them could make it sit right. Someone in the replies added, "Twins having near-identical voices is real, and it is so much creepier than a stranger. Please get your locks changed today, not tomorrow." Ferns for Brains commented, "How does a roommate just hand someone a key and not mention it for months? Caleb owes you a very long conversation." One commenter, Deadbolt Dan, said, "The fact that she sat in the dead twins' exact spot to record it is the most disturbing line in this whole thing." One comment pointed out, "Right? She wasn't hiding that she'd been there. She was performing the visit. She wanted him to eventually hear where she'd been sitting." The locks changed by noon. The fear did not. I had the locks changed the next morning, before my shift even started. A locksmith stood in my doorway by 8, and I watched him swap the cylinder like it was the only solid thing left in the world. I never confronted Natalie. There was no scene, no shouting, nothing that snapped clean and let me feel better. She just stopped existing in my life. No calls, no key, no voice sliding into the playlist between two sad songs. Just absence, which, it turns out, fixes nothing. I deleted the memorial playlist, every track of it, even the real songs, because I could not trust which were music and which were her sister breathing in my living room. I still go to the clinic. I still scrape plaque and tell strangers to floss and smile like my chest is fine. But I cannot stand silence in my own apartment anymore. I check the closet before I can breathe, every single time, even knowing the lock is new. The one voice that used to mean comfort to me, that warm, easy sound, now makes my hand shake if I hear anything close to it. So I keep the place loud. Music, a show, a fan, anything. Always. Because when it goes quiet, the quiet sounds exactly like someone sitting very still on the left side of my couch, listening to me not notice. Caleb and I still share these walls. He apologized more than once. I believe he meant no harm, but I cannot look at him the same way, and we both know it. And the apartment holds that strain like a held breath. The thread filled one last time, gentler now, the way people speak around someone who barely made it out. Deadbolt Dan commented, "She described items inside your apartment. That's not grief. That's surveillance with a sad story attached to it." A user named Tradmore wrote, "The detail about the chipped mug you bought 2 days earlier rules out any old clip. That voice was in your kitchen this week. Grief can wear the most familiar face in the world, and that is exactly why it gets through the door. Now, on to the next one. My upstairs neighbor sleepwalks to our building's attic every night and bolts it from the inside. My mom swears she's never actually asleep. Some warnings only sound true once it is far too late to do anything about them at all." I'm 25, a teacher, and for 2 years I've lived in the basement studio of an old converted house with my mother. It's one low-ceilinged room. Our beds may be an arm's length apart. Upstairs there's a tenant named Megan, and above the whole building sits a shared attic, reached by a hatch on the top landing. For months, my mother kept telling me someone was moving around in the dead space above our bed at night, breathing, shifting, something settling, then going still, like it was listening back. Every time, I'd reach across the dark and tell her there was no one up there. It was just the old house. Go back to sleep. I was wrung out from work and quietly scared her mind was slipping. Megan climbs to that attic almost every night and bolts the hatch from the inside. The few times anyone caught her, she called it sleepwalking, looked mortified, and the house quietly stopped asking. So I stopped too. Then one night, I heard the footsteps for myself, slow and deliberate, right over our heads, and I climbed the stairs after them. The hatch was thrown shut and bolted from the inside, with Megan still up there. Standing on that dark landing, I finally understood that the attic void drops in one unbroken channel down the old chimney chase to the crawl space directly above where my mother and I sleep. It is strange how long a person will keep calling something a story, only because believing it costs less than the truth would. Nothing solid stood between the two of them and whatever had learned to go quiet whenever it heard them stir below. Morning has a way of making the night before feel like something a tired mind invented. The next morning, I caught Megan in the shared hallway and asked her, straight out, what she was doing up there. She was calm, almost gentle about it. She said she sleepwalks, that she'd woken on that landing with no idea how she got there, that it scared her too, and she was so sorry. She promised it wouldn't happen again. And I let myself believe her, because believing her was easier than the alternative. But the footsteps didn't stop. That was the first night I really listened, lying flat in the dark with my eyes open, and everything my mother had described for months lined up exactly. A slow shift of weight from one side to the other, something settling, then a long pause that felt less like quiet and more like someone holding still to hear if we'd noticed. In daylight, I traced it. I measured the room, found the chimney chase running up behind the water heater, and followed it with my eyes to the ceiling above our beds. That dead channel didn't stop at our ceiling. It climbed, unbroken, all the way to the attic Megan sealed herself inside every night. I kept thinking about all the times she had whispered, "There's someone up there," and I'd sighed and told her to go back to sleep, that her ears were playing tricks. I'd been so sure I was protecting her from her own mind. That night I lay awake and heard it too, plain as anything. And when my mother stirred and asked if I'd heard that, I said no. I told her it was nothing. I lied to her face so she wouldn't be more frightened than I already was. There is a particular cruelty in comforting someone with the very lie that is hunting you both. Denial is a roof, and it only holds until the night you finally feel the cold coming through it. I tried doing things the sensible way first. One night, I climbed to the top landing and knocked on the hatch, soft, then hard, and called Megan's name. Nothing came back, not a creak, not a breath, just that bolted board and a silence that felt staged. I told the landlord the next day, and he gave me the same tired shrug everyone gave. She sleepwalks, poor thing, leave her be. So the sounds kept stacking up, small and specific. A faint, sour smell near the water heater that hadn't been there before. A thread of warm air drifting out of the chase like something was breathing through it. And every night, at almost exactly the same hour, a single weight settling directly over our bed. My mother would flinch awake and whisper, "She's back!" And for the first time, I didn't correct her. I just pulled her in and held her, and I felt my certainty crack right down the middle. The next afternoon, while Megan was out, I pried at the access panel behind the water heater. It came loose, and warm air rolled over my hand, stale and human. Inside the void, there were clothes folded into a hollow, food wrappers pressed flat, a dent worn into the insulation in the exact shape of a body. It wasn't a place someone passed through in their sleep. It was a place someone had been living, patient and close, for a very long time. The comments understood, faster than she had, what kind of person bolts a door from the wrong side. Marrow and Dust commented, "A bolt that only works from the inside is not a sleepwalking story. Sleepwalkers wander. They don't secure a door behind themselves and then climb down a chimney chase in the dark," one comment pointed out. 2 sentences in, and I knew the mother was right. The people we write off as paranoid are so often just early. One commenter, not that deep, said, "Please tell me the notebook went straight to the police and you did not read all of it. Some things you cannot put back in your head once you've read them." A few days after that panel came loose, she came back to post what the police pulled out of the wall. They opened the wall behind the water heater and found her notebook. I called the police the same afternoon I saw the nest, and they came that evening. They opened the wall behind the water heater, the same panel I had pried at, and they followed the chase up with their lights. They did not find an empty hollow. They found Megan, folded into the shaft above our ceiling, awake, blinking at the beams like she'd been disturbed mid-rest. She had been living in that void for weeks, not passing through it in her sleep, living in it, breathing above our bed every single night, close enough to hear us turn over. And the part I cannot put down is this. Every time my mother woke me whispering that someone was up there, she was right. She wasn't confused. She wasn't losing her mind. She was giving me an exact, accurate report of a real person lying in the dark a few feet above her face. And I answered every one of those reports by stroking her hair and telling her, gently, that her ears were getting old. For half a year, I managed her fear like a symptom. She lay awake under the things she could hear, and I was the one who refused to listen. The whole thread seemed to exhale at once, half of it apologizing to a woman who was never wrong. Third floor tenant commented, "I lived in a converted house exactly like this. Those old chimney chases are a clear vertical shaft from attic to basement once the flue is gone. She wasn't sleepwalking, she was using the building's bones." Someone in the replies added, "Everyone accepting, 'Oh, she just sleepwalks,' is how she got months of access. A reasonable lie that ends conversations is the most dangerous tool a person like that has." What the police carried out of that wall was worse than anyone in the thread had guessed. The notebook was the part I can't shake. The officers found it tucked into the hollow with her things, and what was in it wasn't the scribbling of someone confused. It was a record. Pages of it. The hour my mother and I went quiet each night. The hour we stirred. Which side of the bed each of us slept on. She had logged our routines like a timetable, week after week. And worst of all, she had marked the nights my mother cried, the nights I had soothed her back to sleep, telling her there was no one there. Megan had been a few feet above us, writing those nights down. She is gone now, charged, and the void has been sealed with board and screws, but I can't give my mother back the half a year I spent making her doubt her own ears. She was right the entire time, and I treated her like she was fading. She still won't sleep with the light off. She keeps it burning low all night, and sometimes I catch her staring at the ceiling, listening for a sound that isn't coming back. I lie there too, awake, owing her an apology I don't think a lifetime is long enough to finish saying. The thread didn't pile on her. It tried, gently, to set something down that she was still carrying. One comment pointed out, "The part that wrecked me is you correcting your own mom for months. She wasn't confused. She was the only one in that house who was actually listening." In the comments, someone wrote, "I will never understand landlords who let a known nighttime wanderer keep accessing shared structure. The whole building enabled this without meaning to. Believe the quiet ones who keep listening, and let's head on to the next one." I, 26, found a grave wearing my own face in the village my girlfriend brought me to. I work from home as a freelance graphic designer, mostly logos and book covers, the kind of job where you can vanish for 2 weeks and nobody but your partner notices. So when Olivia asked me to come with her to the mountain village her grandmother grew up in, I said yes. We share a little stone cottage out in the country, and I figured one remote place would just trade for another. It took 2 flights and 4 hours of switchback road to get there. 1 road in. By the time we climbed the last stretch, the fog had swallowed everything behind us, and my phone had given up looking for a signal somewhere back at the tree line. The village was maybe 30 houses and a church, all gray stone, and an old guest house run by a soft-spoken caretaker named Garrett. Olivia lit up the second we arrived. She knew the lanes, the names, the way the doors stuck. I was charmed by how at home she was, even jet-lagged and running on bad airplane coffee. What I couldn't shake was the way the villagers looked at me. Not unfriendly. Worse than that. They'd see my face, stop mid-sentence, and go quiet, the way a room does when someone walks in late to a funeral. By the second night, I still couldn't sleep. I went downstairs for water, barefoot, phone torch in hand. Tucked into a nook under the stairwell, I found a little shrine I hadn't noticed before. Candles burned down to stubs, dried flowers, and photographs, laid out flat like offerings on a plate. I picked one up. It was me. Asleep in our room upstairs, the blanket exactly how I'd left it an hour ago. There were others, all of me sleeping, all from tonight. And the newest one was taken from directly above the bed, looking straight down at my face, from an angle where there is nothing but a low plaster ceiling and no place on this earth for a camera to be. He didn't wake her. He told himself there was a sane explanation and went looking for it. I put the photo back exactly where I found it and lay awake the rest of the night, watching the ceiling I now couldn't trust. By morning, I'd talked myself halfway calm. A prank. Some old village custom Olivia forgot to warn me about. Maybe Garrett himself, the caretaker, slipping in with a key. So I studied him over breakfast. He was polite, refilled my coffee without being asked, but every question I floated slid right off him. When I mentioned the little shrine under the stairs, his hands went still over the pan. He told me, gently, not to touch it, that it wasn't mine to move. Then he changed the subject like a man closing a door. I couldn't let the angle go. That's the designer in me. I notice when something's off by a degree. While Olivia napped, I stood on a chair and went over our ceiling inch by inch. Low plaster, solid, no hatch, no seam, no mount, not even a nail hole. There was no place above that bed for a lens to sit. I checked my phone and hers too while she slept. Nothing. No new files, no strange apps. That should have settled me. Instead, the shrine grew. By afternoon, there were fresh photos laid out, ones from that very nap, Olivia and me curled together, shot from inside a room I had locked myself. And Olivia stayed calm through all of it, drifting through the village like she'd been born in it, every gray old face brightening when she passed. They greeted her by name. They couldn't look at me. That night, I decided I was done waiting in the guest house. In the morning, I'd walk the village myself and find out what they all already seemed to know. The next morning, Olivia went off to lay flowers at her relatives' graves, and for once she didn't ask me to come. So I walked the village alone. It was small enough to cross in 10 minutes, all of it leaning toward the little gray church at the top of the lane. Beside the church sat a low annex with a hand-painted sign I couldn't read, but through the window I could see shelves of ledgers and a counter, a records office. Something about it pulled at me before I understood why. I didn't get that far. An old woman stopped me in the lane. She was tiny, wrapped in black, and when she looked up at my face, her whole body went still. Then she reached up with both hands and cupped my cheeks, and she began to weep, saying a word over and over that I didn't know, but somehow felt like a name. Not a stranger's surprise. Recognition. Grief even, like something lost had walked back up the hill. It wasn't just her. All week I'd read the staring as suspicion of an outsider. Standing there with her hands on my face, I finally understood it was the opposite. To them, I wasn't new. I was returning. They greeted Olivia because she belonged, and they couldn't speak to me because, somehow, they already knew me. A man steadied her and led her off, murmuring something apologetic, and one phrase came through clear enough that I caught it later from Garrett, too. The register. There was a book, an old burial register, kept by one family in the village for generations, and every name in the ground was written in it. Whatever was happening to me, whatever those photographs were, the answer wasn't a prank hidden in our ceiling. It was older than that, and it was written down. I decided I was going to find that book. The post had blown up overnight, and the comments had questions of their own. Fern Gully Lurker commented, "The overhead angle is what got me. There is no innocent way to photograph someone from a ceiling that does not open." Dana Reads Too Much commented, "You keep calling Garrett the caretaker like he runs the place. Who told you that? Olivia?" In the comments, someone wrote, "Did the guest house have any roof or crawl access above your room? That straight down angle is the part I cannot let go of." The poster responded with, "There was a crawl space, and Garrett walked us up to show it on the first afternoon like it was a charming feature of the building. What I left out is that Olivia already knew it was there. She asked him to open it before I had even seen the room." Then, days later, he came back to the post, not with a question, but with an answer. The records office wrote back, and her family had filed me. I got into the records office while Olivia was still up the hill among the graves. Garrett didn't stop me. He just watched from the doorway like a man who had decided long ago that it wasn't his to stop. The register was exactly what the old woman had meant. A heavy municipal book, stamped and dated, one family's handwriting running back generations. I found my full name on a page near the middle, and beside it, a death date from the 1970s, years before I was born. The clerk's note pointed to a plot, so I walked out and found it. A low headstone with a ceramic portrait set into the stone, and the face looking out of that portrait was mine. Not a resemblance, mine. Then the floor went out from under me a second time. The handwriting that kept that register, the family that had entered every name in that ground for generations, was hers, Olivia's. The sleeping photographs, the impossible overhead angle, the whole trip she had so gently talked me into. She didn't bring me to see where her grandmother grew up. She brought me back because my face was already waiting on a stone here, and she is the one who keeps the book it is written in. The update climbed even faster than the first post, and the calm of it scared people more than any scream would have. A user named Patrick Offline wrote, "A municipal register is not a prop. Someone walked into a records office and filed your name. That is the line that should terrify you." Brendan K. commented, "Please tell me you photographed the register before you left. A record like that does not stay legible for long if a family wants it gone." One commenter, Patrick Offline, said, "The pending interment line is the worst sentence in this whole post. They were not predicting a death, they were waiting on a delivery." Someone else added, "Exactly. And the delivery had a name and a face years before he was old enough to grow into it. Whoever supplied that portrait knew what he would look like at 26. I left the next morning before the fog lifted. I told Olivia I'd had a work emergency, packed light, and walked the one road out until a delivery truck took pity on me. She didn't argue. She just watched me go from the guest house door with a small, patient look, like someone who knew the road only runs in a circle. Garrett didn't say goodbye at all. Back home in our cottage, I tried to file the whole thing under bureaucratic nonsense. A foreign clerical error, a dead man who happened to share my name and, somehow, my face. So I wrote to the records office and asked them, formally, to strike the entry. I wanted a stranger with a stamp to tell me it was a mistake. The reply came last week. They were very polite. They confirmed the entry could not be amended because it had not been filed in error. It had been entered decades ago by the family who has kept the register for generations. The same family named as the registrants of the plot. Her family. They had written my full name into that book years before she and I ever met. And beside it, where a burial date should sit, the clerk had copied the original notation forward, unchanged. My internment was listed as pending. That was when it finally landed. Olivia didn't meet me at a party 4 years ago. She found me. She went looking for the face that was already waiting on that stone, and when she found it walking around in the world, she brought it home. That single word, pending, is the one he keeps circling. It does not describe something finished. Quiet Moth commented, "Ceramic portraits on graves are a real tradition in a lot of those regions. The fact that it matched your face means somebody supplied that photo on purpose." A user named Saltwater Collins wrote, "I have read a lot of these, and the part that does not leave me is that she slept beside you every night, knowing your grave already had your face on it." He still lives in that cottage, and he says she has not called once, which somehow frightens him more than if she had. On to the next one. I, 37, male, bought a small vending route, and one machine is being secretly run by someone using my name. He needed the money. That was all this was ever supposed to be. I am 37, a speech therapist during the day, and I still live in my mother's house with her. Her medical bills got heavy this past year, and money got tight enough that I started hunting for anything on the side. That is how I ended up buying a cheap vending route off a man named Logan. 8 machines, all of them barely running, but it was honest extra cash, so I took it. 7 of them behave exactly like sad old vending machines should. They empty out, they jam, the coin mechanisms drain down right on schedule, and I drive around refilling them and pulling the cash like clockwork. Then there is the 8th one, sitting in a 24-hour laundromat clear across town. Every single time I show up to service it, it is already fully stocked, every row packed tight, and the cash drawer is already empty, wiped clean, like somebody beat me there by hours. For weeks I told myself it was a glitch in my schedule, or maybe Logan's still poking around out of habit. Last night I finally logged into the card reader telemetry portal to read the history on that one machine. Every visit is logged at 3 in the morning. Restock and cash pull, 3 a.m. Every entry signed off by Aaron, followed by my own full legal name. On nights I was dead asleep in my own bed, in my mother's house, beside no one. And the account doing all of it was created 4 years before I ever bought this route. 3 in the morning. His name. His handwriting on an account he never opened. Someone had been signing that name long before it ever belonged to him. He kept telling himself there had to be an explanation, a glitch, anything. For 3 days straight, I could not stop refreshing that portal. I would sit at the kitchen table after my last therapy session of the day, watching the history, and new entries would just appear under my name faster than I could screenshot them. Restock and cash pull, 3 in the morning, signed Aaron, my full legal name, over and over. So I called the card reader company. A support rep named Chloe picked up, and she was kind about the whole thing. She pulled the account while I waited and told me gently that everything looked completely normal. The account was verified. The name matched my own exactly. The activity was consistent with months of regular service. From her screen, I was the one logging in at 3 a.m. I tried to explain that I was asleep at that hour every single night, that I work mornings and I help my mother before bed, and it sounded insane the second it left my mouth. For one ugly minute, I actually wondered if I was getting up and driving across town without remembering it. Then I rejected that because I am not a sleepwalker, and no man restocks a vending machine in his sleep for 4 years. I called Logan next, the man who sold me the route, and asked whether that laundromat machine had ever been separate or under some different account before me. He got vague fast. He said he only ever dealt with the 7 machines he cared about, and that the 8th one just came with the lot. He could not even tell me where it had come from. My mother asked why I kept staring at my phone at dinner, and I did not have an answer that would not scare her. So tonight I am starting a log. Every entry time matched against exactly where I was. I figured if I could prove where my body actually was, the whole thing would finally fall apart. But how do you prove you were asleep, and to whom? The more he tried to prove he was himself, the more the world disagreed. I started calling everyone in the chain. The card reader company first, then the payment processor sitting behind them, then the bank that the machine's deposits route into. At every single place, the same thing happened, and every single time, it flipped against me. The older account was the real Aaron. I was the question mark. When I asked the bank to freeze the machine's deposits, they asked me to verify the account I was trying to freeze, and I could not, because it was built before I ever existed in their system. One rep told me, very politely, that repeated attempts to access an account that is not yours can be treated as fraud. She said it like she was doing me a favor. I stood in my mother's kitchen holding my own driver's license, my actual face, my actual name printed right there, and I could not make a single institution agree that it was mine. It is the strangest kind of sick feeling, being slowly erased out of your own name while the proof of it is sitting in your hand. My mother kept asking if everything was all right with the route, and I just told her it was paperwork. The thing I keep circling back to is that the 7 dying machines never mattered to anybody. Only the 8th one stays alive. Somebody works hard to keep that one machine breathing, restocked, pulling real cash at 3 in the morning, year after year. And I cannot stop asking myself what that machine is actually for. Half Calf Morning commented, "Wait, the account predates your purchase by 4 years? That's not a glitch. That's someone who set up a whole life under your name and needed a real business to make it look legit." A user named Moss and Maple wrote, "Do not keep logging into that portal. Every login you make is being recorded as the new party on an account they've owned for years. You are building their fraud case for them." Someone in the replies added, "Synthetic identity fraud. The machine isn't the prize, your name is. I'd bet the bank account tied to that card reader is older than your real one." The reply to that was, "You're right, and it's worse than that. When I called the card reader company, Chloe pulled the account, and the bank linked to it has a credit history going back 9 years, longer than the line of credit I actually opened myself last spring. When I said it was fraud, she told me the older account has priority and asked me to verify my identity. I'm the one who got flagged." Then, just hours after his last reply, the OP came back with an update nobody wanted to read. I'm in the laundromat parking lot right now, and someone just pulled in. I could not let it go, so tonight I drove out to the laundromat a little before 3 in the morning to physically catch whoever beats me to that machine. I figured if I just stood there in person, the whole thing would have to make sense. The machine was already freshly restocked, every row packed. the cash drawer already wiped clean, hours before I ever showed. And tucked behind the coin return, there was a folded slip of paper with my name written on the outside. My actual name. I was still standing there holding it when my phone rang. It was my mother, from the house, sounding shaken. She said a woman named Vanessa had just called the landline asking her to tell Aaron to stop logging in. That is when it finally landed for me. The Aaron on that account is not a person who stole one machine. He is a whole fake me, stitched together from my information years ago, and this one cash machine is what keeps that fake me looking real to a bank. I just happened to buy the exact route they were using to season it. To every institution, that older Aaron is the real one now, and I am the fraud breaking into my own life. I am typing this from my car because I do not know what else to do. And while I was writing this, headlights just swung across the lot. A car is pulling in. One commenter, Drew in the Cut, said, "Get out of there right now. Whoever services that machine at 3 a.m. just watched you find their note. Leave first, think later." One comment pointed out, "Before you drive off, photograph everything. The note, the machine, and that car's license plate. That's the only proof that exists outside their account." And the original poster replied, "I got the note and the machine. The car is idling sideways across 2 spaces, so I cannot see the plate yet, and I am not getting out to check. The headlights are still on me." He never got out of the car. He just kept typing. I am still in the parking lot. The car that pulled in is idling maybe 40 feet away with its lights on me, and it has not moved, and neither have I. The note with my name on it is still sitting in my lap. My mother is still on the phone, and I told her to lock the front door and not open it for anyone because the woman named Vanessa has our landline number, and she used my name like she owns it. I keep trying to line it all up in my head. To the bank, to the processor, to the card reader company. I am the imposter now. The other Aaron has 9 years of history and a verified account, and I have a driver's license that apparently means nothing. Somebody has been being me for 4 years, longer than I have even owned this route, and they kept one sad little machine in a laundromat alive just to keep that fake version of me looking real. I do not know what to do right now. If I drive away, they know my route and they know my mother's address. If I get out and walk up to that car, I do not know who is in it. And if I call the police, I am the one with repeated flagged attempts to access an account that is not mine, so I genuinely do not know whose side they land on when they show up. I am sitting here with my doors locked, asking a thread of strangers what my next move is, because every official channel already thinks I am the liar. The car still has not moved. I am going to keep this open. Quietly Unhinged commented, "Please post an update the second you are safe. So many of us are sitting here refreshing. Do not go quiet on us tonight." One commenter, Consonant Drift, said, "Do not call the regular emergency line where you have to explain the fraud history. Call the non-emergency police number, say there is a vehicle following you, and stay on with them while you drive to a lit gas station." Thank you for listening all the way through tonight. If these kept you company, subscribe and stay close, because there are always more of them waiting in the dark.